Chapter 8. Sadia walked into the family room, holding back the tears as they welled in her eyes. She glanced at her mother and then Adrianne. "Where is Tracker?" Adrianne asked. "He left." Her voice soft as usual. Her innocent eyes wandering around the room with the Samsa men glaring at her. She could read their faces. They were disappointed in her. It was as if she wasn't appealing enough to Tracker for him to consider her. There was none more telling expression than the one coming from Lycell. He sat there, his head slanted, his eyes blinked once, and it sounded as if he sucked in a breath as if he was relieved. Perhaps he didn't think she was woman enough to hold his son captive by her charms and body. She needed strength of mind and body to control a wolf like his son Tracker, Lycell thought. She was too young and inexperienced to ever control Tracker. It was all about appeal and submission with Lycell. A werefemale had to be willing to do everything that a werewolf asked of her, especially in bed. She had done those things, but she had gone a step further and covered her werefemale smell with that of a human. No werefemale had been able to fool a werewolf until now. Had it been the experimental serum that Robert had given Mina to ensure her pregnancy, which had adverse effects on Robert's offspring? For some reason, Mina only had girls born to them. But they had been gifted with the ability to change forms and disguise it so well that no one could tell they weren't human. Especially another werewolf. Female humans were considered special because they weren't sterile. Werewolves sought them out to mate with them. "Where did Tracker go?" Adrianne asked, pushing the question further. Sadia sat to the left of her father and placed her head on his shoulder. Robert glared over at Lycell, with his family watching also. Wilder wasn't pleased by the look he saw on their faces. "I knew this would happen, Wilder. It was your idea to mate my girls with Lycell's sons. It was the only thing to do. Who would treat them better than Lycell's sons?" Wilder said. Robert didn't respond to that question. Robert knew what Wilder said was true. But Robert had reservations all along about Tracker. "Tracker isn't stable." Lycell cut his eyes in Robert's direction, and Robert twisted in his seat. Yet he didn't apologize for his feelings or words. When Adrianne met Robert's eyes, he turned away out of respect, but he didn't want his daughter with Tracker, and he didn't care who knew it. He was that way since a pup. Look at all the times you had to get him out of trouble, and then some man shot him because he... Adrianne placed her hand to her mouth, and then grabbed Lycell's wrist, holding it firm. Lycell placed his hand over hers. Robert paused, realizing he had gone too far, and he shouldn't say some things in front of Adrianne and Mina, and especially his daughter. "I had to take care of him. I got out of my bed in the middle of the night, and drove to care for him because I thought he wanted to marry my Sadia." Robert placed his hand over Sadia's hand and held her close. Sadia turned and looked at Mina, then lowered her eyes and her mouth fell into a closed tight line. She had tried her best to make him marry her, but it didn't work because, as he said, she had gone too far. No man, and especially a werewolf, wanted to think he had been manipulated. And with a superior werewolf like Tracker, it was unforgivable if any woman dared try and succeed. And Sadia had succeeded. "You knew Tracker could have died and didn't tell me?" Lycell questioned. "My son, my firstborn, almost died, and you didn't breathe a word about it?" Lycell stood, his eyes narrow, and he raised an eyebrow. Robert stood too, watching at him. They stared each other down. Robert was no match for Lycell, and he knew it, but it was a matter of his daughter's honor and pride. Very few werewolves, shifters, or men could compete with Lycell in a fight, especially not Robert. The only one who probably could take on Lycell would be Wilder or Tracker, but no werewolf would defy or attack his father or brother, and an alpha at that. So what could Robert do but look menacing? It could be a joke if Robert wasn't so serious. Instead, Robert walked away from a fuming Lycell and stood over Wilder. "This is your fault," he said, turning to Wilder. You knew how Tracker was and still you pushed for him to marry and mate with my young daughter." Mina watched at Adrianne. If this continued the way it was going with Robert attacking the Samsas, their friendship would be torn apart and forever damaged. Mina's girls would never be able to marry, she thought. The Samsa werewolves were the most prominent of shifters, and Mina's were females needed to mate soon. How could they possibly marry humans? There were none around respectable enough for Robert to sanction that union, let alone agree to give his precious girls up to marry humans. And the cat shifters were out of the question. He knew how the humans and shifters behaved in Samsaville. They were drunk and womanizers, but if they married the more respectable doctors or lawyers and left Samsaville, then he couldn't protect them. Robert didn't want to risk his girls leaving the security of the Samsas. Wilder pushed himself up, then standing over Robert. He was not one brought to anger fast, but Robert was out of order. And even though Robert had been a good friend, he had overstepped his bounds with Lycell and Wilder. After all, he was only human, and Wilder had protected him from the Alaskan clan and sanctioned the marriage to Mina when her father forbid it. And the Samsa pack risked the wrath of the Alaskan clan. That threat was always looming. And one day the war would come to the Samsa's doorsteps. Adrianne, knowing Wilder's slow-burn temperament, held his hand to quiet him. Tracker is the best werewolf for Sadia. He will come to his senses and realize that outside of Samsaville, in the world of men, things are not what it appears to be, and it's a long journey to happiness. We all had to arrive at that realization. Some sooner than others, Wilder said. Wilder's eyes locked on Lycell's. Lycell knew what he meant. When Wilder first brought Adrianne home to become a mate to the three brothers, Lycell, out of jealousy and spite, refused to accept her. "Give him time to come to his senses," Wilder said, looking down at Adrianne, and Adrianne smiling up at him, and then to Lycell. "What do you want Sadia to do?" Robert questioned, not satisfied. His tone still aggressive. "Wait on him," Lycell added. "Until she can't have children?" Adrianne questioned, turning to Lycell. He turned with a glare. He had never been angry with her in the time they mated. And she had never been against him. But now she was, and he didn't like it. Not one damn bit. Lycell walked to Adrianne and held out his hand. "We have to talk." "You're talking now," Wilder said with a raised eyebrow. The whole ordeal of Tracker leaving had opened a gulf in Adrianne and Lycell, and Wilder's relationship. Lycell turned to Wilder with a jerk. "This doesn't concern you, Wilder. Tracker is my son and Adrianne's son. If it were Hunter and Devon, would you want me to interfere?" "Everything that concerns Adrianne concerns me," Wilder said with a blazing, defiant alpha look, as if he was preparing for battle. Lycell's hair stood on the back of his neck. The old competitive nature and jealousies began to surface again with all of them, except Drayton. But Drayton was consumed with his son, and he couldn't be bothered with the petty suspicions of Lycell and Wilder. This had been brewing for some time. Wilder asked Adrianne for more sons, and Lycell asked her to put it off. He had 6, and that was enough for him. Besides, she wouldn't have the time to attend to his needs if she had gotten pregnant for Wilder. Robert said, "I see this is about more than Sadia and Tracker. I'm leaving." He reached for Mina, who was up, and had Sadia by the hand. They stood looking around, and silence had overtaken the room for a second. Mina knew something had to be said to break the hush. "I'll talk to you tomorrow, Adrianne. Maybe we can meet for lunch," Mina said as Robert practically dragged her to the door. Adrianne retrieved her hand from Lycell and followed them to see them out. "Yes. We'll meet tomorrow. I'll call you, and I assure you we can solve some of these problems with our boys and girls," Adrianne said, smiling after watching at Wilder and Lycell, then shooting them a closed, determined smile. Whenever her eyes met theirs, it was her way of asserting her power over both of them, and they knew it. They had promised her that when it came to her family she had as much or more of a vote than they did, and she would have the last say. Adrianne stood at the door as Robert and his family stepped outside and headed for his Range Rover. Wilder closed the door, and when Adrianne, Wilder, and Lycell turned around, Thorne and Damon were standing facing them. "Did we miss anything?" Thorne asked. "What you two, Thorne?" Adrianne said, giving out a huff and trotting up the stairs. Wilder and Lycell looked to see which room she was going to. When they looked away following her movement up the stairs, Damon and Thorne were outside swimming. Wilder made an attempt to walk up the stairs, and Lycell took his arm. Wilder looked down. "Are we going to start that? Remember, she was my mate first." "How could I forget? You remind me every chance you get," Lycell's voice hard and cool. "You would think that having all those sons by Adrianne would have eased your jealousy, but it hasn't. I'm going up to my mate and then I'm going to try like hell to make more pups," Wilder said, jerking his arm from Lycell. Wilder had been busy with council meetings and traveling, and hadn't given Adrianne the attention she wanted from him. Lycell had excuse after excuse for not attending the meetings, but Wilder knew it was to be alone with Adrianne. Lycell didn't want to leave her. He had fallen lasting in love, and for Lycell, that was a feat considering his womanizing ways before he met Adrianne. Wilder wasn't a vindictive wolf, but that human part of him gave in to that weakness, and now he was trying his best to impregnate Adrianne. If just to get back at the conceited Lycell, who never misses an opportunity to throw in his face that he has 6 sons and Wilder has only 2. And poor Drayton has only 1. But Drayton didn't care. No one and nothing is as important as Adrianne and his son. Especially since Drayton thought he would never have a pup. Lycell threw those figures about him and his 6 sons, as if that is the standard for being the head alpha. They all shared that distinction. Wilder, Lycell, and Drayton. That is how their father wanted it. He wanted them equal to keep them together, but then there was the need to build a pack, and it didn't appear that would happen until Adrianne came into their lives. Adrianne, devoted to all of them, thought nothing of it. She tried to make sure they had her equally, and they had no doubts about her loving them. But for some reason Wilder needed reassurance, and he never needed it more than now. When he opened the door and walked straight to his bedroom, Adrianne wasn't there. Wilder's heart sank. He had wanted her more now than ever. His insecurity had never been a problem with him in no aspect of his life, except with Adrianne. Now he needed her to encourage him that she was his, if just for these few minutes. Wilder stood angry, and then the door to the shower opened and she stepped out, back and pulled out and stood on the floor. How beautiful a man he was. Tall and muscular. Dark hair and the bluest of eyes. "I have never known you to be that selfish, Wilder. What is going on with you? I want more sons and you've been avoiding me. So you took it on yourself to interfere with my desires. I wanted to take a trip with you and be at your side. Enjoy our lives away from the ranch, but it's not what I want anymore. It's what you and Lycell wants. Drayton isn't like you two. That's why I picked him to marry. And now I might just leave you and Lycell and go with him, and there will be nothing you can do about it. It's not going to happen. You aren't going anywhere. I forbid you to do it. Now you're acting like my father and not my husband, mate, and lover. We'll see if you can stop me," Adrianne said, her tone defiant and bold. Wilder felt weak for the first time in his life. For the first time, he couldn't control things the way he controlled his land, his council, and his pack. Adrianne was the cornerstone of the pack. The mother to all the yearlings and pup, and because of his stupid mistake, his life and pack is falling apart. Tracker broke the pack when he decided to leave. If Adrianne goes, there will be nothing for Wilder, or any of the Samsa brothers. All Adrianne's 8 sons are yearlings, and are capable of going out on their own, and they have practically gone already. Only Thorne and Damon are there at the ranch, and they are talking about leaving and meeting Tracker and forming a pack of their own. This world that Wilder brought Adrianne into is crumbling, and she can't put it together. Having more pups with Wilder will not ensure her of the happiness that she found with him, and now is in jeopardy of losing. Adrianne threw on her robe, looked at Wilder, and walked out of the room to go to the nursery. Drayton was sure to be there, he thought. Did she mean what she said? He needed time to think. Try to calm Adrianne, because he knew she would do something drastic just to prove she could. It was the woman she was, and because of that, he had loved her more than ever before. Strength was the only thing a werewolf respected. And if Adrianne didn't have the strength of body, she had strength of mind and spirit,